The legal court as well, and the finance court as well. Would you describe this as a necessary evil?
It's evil, but not necessary. I don't want to add a necessary evil simply means that which we can't do anything about. I think probably we haven't really looked at how we can do at it from a point of view of talking to everybody who matter in this. I think it's important that individual holders be heard. It looks like a program which came from the government side to the other side, and that's why many people are complaining. At the last time I checked, not many people are signed on to the debt exchange program, which shows a sign of protest. And if it's not properly handled, it can have other ramifications. So I look at it from that ordinary Ghanaian perspective. And the worse it gets for businesses, and the worse it gets for my business and for my individual, survival. So it's quite important that we handle it well. Let me give you an example which maybe a couple of people have heard them talk about, but probably it's not been explored. Let's take the institutional holders. Let's assume that you had some corporate entities which are SOEs, which can be operated in a way that they can have return on capital. Let's assume government wanted to divest itself of it. I did hear the Minister for Public Enterprises, if I got his title right, say that 17 enterprises are going to be divested. Is it possible, for example, to call George Biafra Limited and say, I owe you this amount, will you take this company which I have valued instead of me deferring your payment? In that case, you manage that company and get some returns. At least you own a company, right? Because at the moment, the secondary market is virtually dead. And therefore, if you have an instrument you wanted to discount it, you are not likely to get a buyer for it. But some people, not many, but some people may be ready to take a government asset and say that I will manage this asset, or I will save this asset to 2030 or 2035, and I will find a way of making my own instrument of, in which case you don't owe them anymore. And in which case, some of these assets, which are real liabilities sitting on government books, will leave your books. The point is, government has that liability of those state assets anyway, and continuing to hold them on government books itself is putting liabilities on you. If you underwrote those liabilities and ring-fenced it for government and gave it out to people who you owe, who you cannot pay, first you take away the debts that you owe, which you are trying to defer, and then you have the situation where you don't continue that liability in the SOE. So that's another way that government may be able to look at it.
But what do you tell those who might argue that, can government engage everyone? Maybe they can do that through these institutional investors and banks.
That is the more reason why those who are trying to represent people as a class is an interesting development which had not been envisaged. And let's all face it, this has not happened before. So maybe it's new to everybody. So yesterday, I think Edouard and the if my information is right, who is a former Director General of the Security and Commission. So his personality and his, as it were, he's not an ordinary man you can write off. If my information is right, he did speak on behalf of pensioners. And so if a group of people begin to negotiate on behalf of a class, then at least the government now has the chance to meet people who are a class. Because the class the government has been meeting are the financial institutions, the banks, the fund managers, etc. And remember, I've told you that I sit on the board of a fund management subsidiary of a financial institution. So in such cases, we have had the chance to be able to interact with government. But for individuals who have not had the chance, the group and the class thing is okay. At least they feel heard.
Do you think that the problem has to do with communication, and that is where we've had all these challenge, or what?
Maybe the communication is more the non-verbal communication than the verbal. So at times communication can be non-verbal, so people tend to interpret. And at times also the inconsistency. So for example, individual bondholders were not part initially, then they become part. Pensions were part and the pensions are not part, etc. So it makes it difficult to predict, etc. But again, it's just a sign of the challenges we are facing and our government is trying to manage.
You think that the more, and I've had people who have argued that the more this thing delays, time is of an essence, the more rather things could worsen for us, because you are racing against time to get a fund program. And I'll be coming to you on that one, since you predicted that before. And the more it delays, the more it's actually
I
worsening the
don't
situation.
really think our fund program, and again, I'm not a government spokesperson, I'm just a public spirited individual who looks at what is happening. I feel free to comment about it. I don't think our fund program should be in danger. I don't think so. Remember, I said that IMF appears to have shifted from its policy of imposing conditionalities on you to asking you to come with your own proposals. I would like to think that the debt exchange as part of the IMF negotiations is a proposal from government and not an IMF conditionality. I would definitely like to think that. I mean, notwithstanding whatever you feel about IMF, I think they do have a human face. So I believe that it is more of a government program, and which is why if people engage government and government decides to amend this policy, they will go back to the IMF. I don't think the IMF program is at a risk. In any event, just remember, notwithstanding that we didn't sign the debt suspension account last year, IMF has just announced that they are actually talking to our external creditors to suspend or forgive some of us. So if the IMF program was at a risk, we wouldn't be hearing those signs. I think that's a very far-fetched argument.
I want you